Hello and welcome to Rogue Voice, conversations that inspire and connect.
I'm Jessica Gomez, and we have a great show for you today. And we are going to be talking about mental health, which I notice it's one of the things that people really struggle with talking about. I mean, we'll tell people about other types of conditions we might be struggling with, whether it be cancer or high blood pressure or something that's going on. But when it comes to dealing with mental health issues with ourselves or our families, it just becomes one of the things that we really don't open up about.
Absolutely, Jessica. You know, it's like this stigma. And I've had friends and family members who have struggled with this, and then also being honest about it because of the stigma. But to talk with us about the stigma surrounding mental health and how to improve outcomes, we have two very important guests here with us today. Please let me introduce Andrea Childreth, founder of the Lemonade Project, and Athena Goldberg, Vice President of Behavioral Health at AllCare Health. Welcome both to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. You know, again, this is so important, and really, we have many more people, I think, that are working through these issues than most of us even realize. Andrea, I'd like to start with you. Can you tell us about the Lemonade Project and what inspired you to start it?
Well, the Lemonade Project is really a movement dedicated to reducing shame and stigma around mental illness and to advocate for equitable mental illness resources and health insurance coverage, as well as give people, parents, resources at our blog to know how to navigate the different systems and obstacles that people are finding. I was inspired to start it. I actually started it with my first blog was Bipolar Lemonade because my daughter had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Later, you know, she was diagnosed that at 6 years of age, and at 15 she got re-diagnosed with a nonverbal learning disorder, anxiety, depression, and ADHD. So we just face year after year of challenges and crisis and not knowing what to do. And so I started that blog to share that information with other people. Then I wrote a book, and then we rebranded the Bipolar Lemonade to the Lemonade Project last year.
Wonderful. And how, I mean, in terms of your project, how are people responding to it? Are people saying that this is something that's really helped them and having these resources that they can come to, questions and advocacy that you do?
Yeah, you know, when I started the blog, The Bipolar Lemonade, it was in 2014, and my daughter was 13 at the time, and we sent her to a state residential treatment center in Corvallis, and then the one Kairos in Grants Pass. And so I was, you know, I'm going to share this information. I want people to know what we're going through. I can't be the only one, even though I feel so alone and isolated. And when I put that blog out and I shared it on Facebook, I was terrified. But people came out of the woodwork. I mean, they were like, oh my gosh, I've got, you know, this friend and that friend, and I've got a family member and my daughter. And it wasn't as much on Facebook publicly, right? Like out there in front of everybody, where they messaged me privately in the background. So, but yeah, from that time, it's just grown, and people I constantly get, I just looked at some comments last night, you know, thanking me for the website and the blog and the information, that there's really a lack of resources and information out there.
That's great that you're feeling that need. You know, it's all about the need, and you're fulfilling that. Athena, I want to turn to you. Could you tell us a little bit about AllCare Health and how you support members receiving mental health services through your network?
Sure. So AllCare it has a number of different lines of business, but ultimately we're in the business of taking care of the whole person. And so my role is really to, again, take care of that behavioral health piece. And the way in which we do that is we ensure that there's adequate access, that the quality of services are good, and we also partner with those who are on our healthcare plan to really make sure that they're not in the spot where Andrea just described she and her family had been. So we provide care coordination, which means that we partner with families and the members themselves to make sure that they they can navigate what is often a very complicated system with a complicated set of problems already in front of them. So we can reduce that distress and unknown and really find the best treatment and the best fit for them. And we partner them through that process.
I'm really glad to kind of hear you talk in that way of sort of working with the whole person. It's one of the things that I love most about our CCOs is that they're really designed to do that. And they're a little bit different. I mean, AllCare is a little bit different than what your traditional insurance company, sort of the way that they operate. Can you talk a little bit about what makes CCO different from regular insurance companies, and then, you know, how do they sort of handle the issues around mental health differently than what you typically see?
So a lot of layers, at least as I hear them in those questions, because how we deal with a difficult system is that we make sure that we're well educated and that we can know exactly who to contact for what service, and we can get it in a timely fashion. I have a team, and really that's all our role is to really partner with that member and make sure that they have rides. So in a non-traditional insurer, I would not expect to call my insurance if I had difficulty with housing or food or you know, any item that may be a barrier for my receiving care. I would not think to call my insurer. But with the CCO model, that's really what it was intended to do, is address that whole person and not seeing them as having just one episode of care or one need, but really recognizing that when someone is diagnosed, for example, with a cardiovascular issue, often that is accompanying with underlying depression. So we screen for those underlying potentials so that we can give them care proactively and partner them through that process, if that makes sense. But for example, I think of we have programs that when a mother is recognized as newly pregnant, we will reach out to her and we'll do a health screening, and in that we do a depression screening to make sure that if there's any underlying issues that may be exacerbated by hormones or displacement in a household setting, that we are there with them, that they have someone to call. And again, that is not something I would associate with a normal traditional insurance plan.
Yeah, I've never heard of an insurance company taking on that role.
Me either.
I mean, that mine does not. And it's,
no, mine doesn't either.
It's interesting. You sort of mentioned that you know, big changes in life can kind of cause some of these issues to kind of come up. And I know, Andrea, you have some articles, and in your articles, I mean, you wrote that 20% of teens are affected by some sort of mental illness, and that's here in Oregon. We're seeing 20%, and then the suicide rate of young adults, I mean, ages 15 to 24 are just huge, right? So I want to ask you about sort of what advice that you maybe have for families and kids in that age range, and how critical is that early intervention in preventing you know, this type of thing from happening? Because it's just shattering for a family.
Yeah, no, it's devastating. And it's huge. That early intervention is critical. I mean, I believe, and I'm sure Athena believes as well, is that the earlier you can get in and identify what issues are happening, mental, health-wise as well as health, helps mitigate problems and challenges down the road. I think our society tends to be reactive, right? So we kind of criminalize the mentally ill. We wait until they've had all these issues through life, and they're, almost like to the point where it's beyond kind of, control and help, and then we put them in jail, and here, we'll give you some mental health services then, instead of in the schools being proactive and helping out children early on. So I think with parents really being strong advocates is so important, and it is exhausting sometimes, but I always tell parents, if you feel like it's not ringing true to you in your gut, keep asking questions and getting, resources and answers. I mean, with Chloe, her diagnosis is a very, unknown. In our little area, it's more unknown. There really are no resources to help her with treatment or us. And so it wasn't until we, sent her away to residential treatment that we got that diagnosis that we were like, aha, right? Like when she was 15 years old. And it's crazy. And it's just because there were no resources here available, and it's a newer diagnosis. So that constant advocating by the parent is so critical, and just keeping on it with your healthcare providers, educators, all the things.
What would you suggest someone to do if, say, they're in a state that doesn't have the resources, but they can't send their child away? What do you recommend?
Well, I think, the first thing is trying to find a trusted professional that you can trust and you feel good about. And again, I think you've got to listen to that inner gut. We've had for Chloe, psychiatrists or professionals who haven't been a good fit. And if they're not a good fit for you, they're not going to work well with you or the child. So that would be the most important thing. And then do all you can to get resources online, or finding books that can help you. And I follow Ross Green, who's out of the East Coast, and he does collaborative proactive solutions. It used to be collaborative problem solving, which is awesome for kids who are challenged, where they've got a lot of behavioral challenges, and how you work with them. So instead of kind of that traditional top-down parenting where it's like, you're gonna, the authoritative, you're gonna do this or else, it's more of a collaborative is what they call it, and asking the kid questions, what's going on? Because usually when someone's acting or behaving badly, there's other symptoms, or it's a symptom of other issues that are going on. So
Awesome.
it's
Right.
Right. So Athena, I want to ask you, we have a audience question. They ask, what advice do you have for families who know their child is struggling with mental illness, but is having trouble knowing where to start? What can they do?
Well, I think the practical is kind of what Andrea's touched on, is really educate yourself. And really, I think the more a parent feels comfortable and informed, it's easier to advocate for your child. So I would begin there, and really trying to identify what resources are available, and then make contact, because I think the more information you have, the more informed decision you can make, and then partnering with your child. And I think as we talk about stigma, it's often a difficult thing when you go to someone that you love or care for who may be resistant to hearing that you're seeing something is not okay with them. If you're okay with it and you're able to present it in a non-threatening fashion, the more likely the success will be that you're able to assist your child in that transition into treatment.
Okay. Andrea, would you like to respond as well?
I think Athena hit it. What we've been talking about is just the resources, finding a trusted, professional to help you through it, finding the right, websites and books that work for you and give you some guidance. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, great. We have another question that popped up in here, and this is directed to you, Athena. They ask, what policy changes are needed on the state, national level to overcome the obstacles of assessing care and the high financial costs?
That is an amazing question, and I'm trying to calm myself. Great question, viewer. I have a list of those. In fact, I will spend the rest of my day really reviewing some of those. I think, I'll speak more globally because I could pick apart the system as it is. The way I would personally self-soothe, so I'll model, being anxious about being in this work, because it can be very overwhelming because we have a system that has been built poorly and then just continued to be built upon. And I think the foundation is broken. At a point, you have to really take the time to do a deeper dive. It becomes very political very quickly, unfortunately, because really we have to keep our eye on the fact that we're trying to take care of people in the best, most fiscally responsible way we can. So I think really what that looks like, and it's difficult to not see it from a CCO lens or, Oregon Healthcare Plan lens, but I think, again, prior to our recording, I think I believe that there should be more advocating that there's parity within private healthcare systems, that the partnering that we're doing in the CCOs also then carry on over into the private insured area. And again, that was the intent at the end of the day. I think as we become, as a community, more comfortable talking about mental health, we can talk about what the best ways for each individual are. As Andrea spoke to, I mean, not everything works for everyone. It's a goodness of fit. The clinician, the type of service you provided, and where that service is offered, just the setting in itself. So I would say some of the good things that have come out of COVID, if I can say that, are the ability to have telehealth therapeutic sessions. So that has really increased our reach. And that is something at a state level that we are advocating that we keep in the state of Oregon, that there's parity, that people can get their services in the best way for them. And that might be via Zoom, as we're experiencing now.
Absolutely. You know, one of the things I've seen too is that, you know, there's a big difference in how we handle sort of what we consider traditional medical care for a disease or a condition,
right,
and how we handle mental health. Andrea, can you comment on you know, what those differences are and what your personal experience is? And then maybe Athena, you can kind of jump in with why we see such huge disparities in those
Well, yeah, and I think we hit on it a little bit earlier, and Athena said the measurability of mental illness is really difficult, and it's all across the board. I mean, you know, to me, mental illness is a spectrum.
Yes.
And so that measurability of how much treatment and what needs to happen is huge. And so people kind of associate sort of the brain, you know, disassociate the brain from the body. I was, you know, you were talking about what my personal experience was. I was in a IEP meeting for my daughter years ago, and the school district woman said something about, you know, that the dealing with the mental health was something different than the physical health. And my husband, you know, quickly came back and said, last time I checked, the brain is part of the body, right?
Nice.
So there's that kind of stigma and you know, shame that happens with it that shuts people down so quickly. So you know, it'd be great if we could get everything on the same level, and you're treated, your mental illness is treated just as importantly as your physical illness, because it all goes together. And just like Athena was saying, you know, that after you have a baby, you can have postpartum depression. Well, why does that happen? I don't know, right? There's all the chemicals and the hormones and all the things. And we're more okay treating that because it's going to be short term, people think, right? And it's not going to trigger something long term, but it could. Anyhow, so yeah, I just think that there's a lot of pieces that need to be put together at the legislative level of working together, not only just in healthcare, but like Athena was saying, from just across like education, across systems, right? Because the educators, us working with the school system, was not positive at all. It was really a challenge and a struggle, and there was a lot of blaming and, you know, kind of socialization and mental health should be happening at home. It doesn't happen at school, but we all know socialization is huge to children, you know, children's development. So there weren't as many resources that were allocated toward mental health services and supports for those kids and education. So it goes across all levels. And if we can start to marry those and work together in those silos, you know, instead of break down the silos and work together, instead of us working, this is healthcare, this is education, you know, this is our insurance, this is our justice system. I think that that's where some work needs to be done.
And I think, if I may, that's been kind of the difficult part, is because it all sort of ends up in behavioral health, but I can see it goes across systems, and how it's dealt with at a state or legislative level and at a funding level is very much in those traditional silos. So it's very difficult for me. I've gone and looked at education systems and the education that our teachers have, or the resources that our overtaxed teachers have, when it comes to mental health, and they're barely able to just function within their daily sort of expectations, and no one is providing that level of oversight or education so that they are in a better position to address behavioral health issues in a classroom setting. And really, it has to be a different model and a different lens that we deliver that. I know that we've tried at AllCare, we've presented different PACS good behavior games, so that really what you're doing is you're teaching students how to self-regulate, and which is just really self-soothing, and I'm feeling bad, and instead of becoming a behavioral, acting out, that I'm gonna figure out a different way to be able to moderate my feelings and my behavior in this classroom setting, which we all need, even as grown people. It's always a good skill. Really, like trying to teach the children how to develop that skill set. But again, we need everyone to be invested in that change. And that includes, yes, the justice system. But what my experience has been is that the change will be driven over here, and then that leaves one arm of whatever system that has been changed, be it the justice system. The rest of the system has to sort of catch up afterwards, rather than collaboratively coming together and saying, these are the resources we have. How can we all do this and support each other for the same goal in a different way, collaboratively?
Right.
Yeah, you said something really important about sort of the way teachers are kind of being, I guess, expected to sort of handle some of these really tricky situations. And, we think about, social determinants of health and all this education that's kind of going, and we're trying to roll out these different ways of handling issues in the classroom. And teachers, I've talked to many, and they push back and they say, no, I can't. It's wonderful. I understand the concept and I think it's great, but I just can't do anymore. And I think, it's a real challenge in sort of linking all those systems together. Andrea, how important do you feel like advocacy is with sort of your state and federal legislators are? How effective do you think that is in sort of driving some of the change that we really need to see across these systems?
Yeah, well, and I think for me, it's that kind of continued effort, collaborating with others, but it's hard to do, kind of keeping at it and keeping strong, because you know what, it's not a popular conversation. And people aren't just like, yeah, let's talk about mental illness, how we can make it better and more collaborative and all the things. So keeping at it is super important, whether you're a healthcare worker or you're a parent or whatever it may be. I think that one of the challenges that I was going to say with kind of the education system, and like you were talking about, Jessica, with the teachers, is they're expected almost to be counselors or therapists sometimes, and the rate of autism and diagnosis of autism has gone up dramatically, right? And who knows why, right? I mean, we all have our things that we think might be the case. But the other thing that I've had the opportunity to do at a Lemonade Project is work with Grace and Kindness Foundation, which is the founder of Run with Grace. And if you know, it celebrates the memory of Grace Holt, who took her life when she was 15, so pretty young. And we've come up with a teen group called Champions of Change. And what we're learning from them is that social media is playing a whole nother element in their psyche that we as adults didn't have when we were growing up. And it's disturbing. So you talk about that teen suicide, and it's the leading cause of death in young people here in the state of Oregon. You start to ask why, and what do we need to do as adults that's different what do they need to do to address that? Because it's really impacting them is what, you know, kind of what we're hearing. So there's all these different things that are happening. So along with that, they're getting rewired differently than we were, right? Or wired differently from the time that they're really little, they're on screens, whereas we weren't necessarily. So does that, you know, have something to do with the increase in mental illness and in teen suicide?
Wow, that's something to consider. It really is. You know, we're just in different times, and our vices and how we operate in the world has changed. Athena, I'd like to ask you, what are some ways patients or parents can seek mental health services when their insurance is not accepted? And that is really a common case. We hear about that.
Well, that makes me, yeah, that makes me sad to hear. You know, all Oregonians, the last statistics I looked at, 94% of us did have health insurance. So there are some areas that, for example, we talked about incarceration and things like that. They'll fall off Oregon healthcare plan, and there's some other variables. But everyone should have access to care. There are, if they're uninsured, everyone, I know, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, I can think of 4 agencies that will not charge for their services. Either they're National Health Service Corps recipients, or they are federally qualified healthcare centers. They will take all comers. So there always is access. It's a matter of how would that person know that? And I would always ask, if you have a clinician that you're working with and you want to see them in private practice, often they will provide a sliding fee scale. There are always options. It comes down to sort of advocating in a different way, but to see what's possible and not stop with the, I don't accept that insurance, or that, you know, I'm not able to see you because you're uninsured.
Yeah, I feel like you're absolutely right. I feel like that's so refreshing to hear, because I do feel like if you don't educate yourself about other ways to advocate, like you said, then you don't get good answers, right? So you don't get those answers that can kind of fuel and say, okay, well, maybe my normal insurance doesn't take, you know, take what I need to take, but then I can advocate in a different way that maybe they say, okay, well, maybe we'll give you so many sessions for a certain fee, or like you said, sliding fee. Not all parents are thinking like that. So it's about really, how do you expand your thinking? How do you expand your questioning and not being afraid? And I think, do you think also that maybe parents are intimidated? This is an area where you can get overwhelmed. Do you feel that they could be overwhelmed with asking the right question, so then you don't get the service that you need?
Yeah, I think when it comes to parents, there's a lot of embarrassment, because I think, as Andrea has alluded to in a number of ways, I mean, you're afraid that it's something you've done or not done or done improperly. So there's more hesitancy to even ask the questions or push back at all. And I think, you know, that's a judgment that is often unfounded. And, you know, hopefully part of this dialogue today will be part of that change. Is we need to be more honest about the fact that it's very hard to be a parent. There are some days we're all great at it, and other days where we're all terrible at it. And that's okay. You know, we're all learning and growing, and it has to be a safe question to ask. How do I get help? If you can't help me, what would you suggest? There's always another option. So push past that embarrassment, because you're not alone. Every parent who's ever existed has struggled.
Right.
Thank you. All right, so Andrea, I want to ask you our last question really quickly, like 30 seconds, if you can give us a little snapshot. Can you offer any advice for those who are struggling with mental illness themselves? Just a quick, as we wrap up.
You know, just take care of yourself. Listen to yourself. I have actually bipolar. And so I have, you know, really made it my mission in life to make sure that I put myself first and create boundaries with other people, so that I don't end up, you know, down a bad hole, and that I'm managing my illness at all times. So that would be my advice. Get the support you need and put yourself first. Create boundaries is huge.
That's awesome. Wow, that was like a snapshot. Thank you. So I want to thank you, Andrea and Athena, for taking the time to discuss such important topics. And I'm sure our listeners, as much as Jessica and I, enjoyed learning so much. I feel like we could have another half hour talking about this. You guys have so much wealth of knowledge. So remember to tune in to Rogue Voice online every Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and connect with us on our YouTube channel and Facebook, where you can send us a message or leave a comment. We want to hear from you. So tune in. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next time.